Bolshevik Party was not a communist party. Russian Social Democrat Labour Party was formed in 1898, but it accepted a program in its second Congress, 1903, finally held in London, but the same Congress was the founding Congress of both the Bolshevik Party and Menshevik Party by dividing the RSDLP with a declaration of the same program of 35 points for the capitalist development by abolishing the free capitalist orders along with serfdom but difference on organizational policy. Lenin was for democratic centralism, a worst form of autocracy, but covered it by the visible but not free and fair consent of the party men. Therefore, Bolshevik Party was an autocratic party by accepting the democratic centralization as its organizational policy. But the aim and object of a communist party is communism. By abolishing capitalism, thereby the Communist Party is a working class party to win communism, a scientific society of equals. Thus, the Communist Party is a party of communists, so every member of the Communist Party is treated equal by every member. Therefore, everyone is free to express his view and opinion in party forum, and thereby the organizational policy of the Communist Party is communist principle. Lenin was the key founder and main leader of the Bolshevik Party, and he holds 2 votes as a delegate of the State Congress along with 6 others with Martov the Menshevik leader by considering them more powerful than other delegates. In 1918, when the Bolsheviks became the ruling party of Russia, they changed their organizational names to the All Russian Communist Party. It was renamed the All Union Communist Party in 1925 after the founding of the U.S.S.R. and finally to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, CPSU, in 1952. Bolshevik Party has captured the state power by a planned military coup at night by taking advantage of the First World War, and thereby Lenin has formed a government and conducted the Constituent Assembly election under his government. But the voters of Russia have rejected the government of Lenin by defeating his party miserably. Bolshevik Party owned 15% vote of the total vote and got 168 seats out of 703. But Lenin did not care the verdict of the Constituent Assembly election, and finally he dissolved the Constituent Assembly without lawful authority, even not remembering and not considering number 1 founding program of the Bolshevik Party as is, quote, sovereignty of the people, that is, concentration of supreme state power wholly in the hands of the Legislative Assembly, consisting of representatives of the people and forming a single chamber, unquote. Therefore, it is clear that the Constituent Assembly, that is the chamber of the representatives of people, was the real authority to allow or not Lenin to run his government by the significance of the said program number 1. But after the debacle of the Constituent Assembly election, the ruler Lenin became more dangerous autocrat than Tsar, the deposed emperor of Russia, the supreme dictator by his constitution 1906, by committing such dictatorial job of dissolution of the Constituent Assembly, even by ignoring his long-time struggle for the Constituent Assembly, by following the said program and denying his own decree on land, issued just after capturing the state power, where he wrote that, quote, the land question in its full scope can be settled only by the Constituent Assembly, unquote. Therefore, not Lenin, but the Constituent Assembly was the only and sole authority to settle the land question by the said land decree of Lenin for land from reform in Russia. Thereby, the said land decree of Lenin has become invalid by the dissolution of the Constituent Assembly, but Lenin did not care it. Rather, he distributed the land according to his choice by creating discrimination among the mankind by sex, by not allotting equal share for girls. However, Lenin faced but won a civil war with the major fraction of the representative of the people of the Constituent Assembly. Meanwhile, Lenin has promulgated the Constitution of Russia's Soviet Federated Socialist Republic 1918, a worse but vile than the code of the brutal King Hammurabi, the first written code of the world to serve and protect the interests of the masters of the slavery society, to constitute his state a state of state capitalism, a worst form of capitalism, but the rate of exploitation in his state was much higher than U.S.S.R, but he had no legal right to do so. In spite of that, Lenin claimed his state as a socialist state, which is totally false and bogus, but intentional and ill-motivated political propaganda to confuse the war slaves about socialism, a society without capital. Noted, Marx, the discoverer of science of communism, has wrote as is, quote, so far as such criticism represents a class, it can only represent the class whole vacation in history is the overthrow of the capitalist mode of production and the final abolition of classes, the proletariat, unquote. Afterward, to the second German edition, 1873, Capital, Volume 1. Therefore, it is very much clear from this statement of Marx that the working class, the producer of value, thereby surplus value, that is capital, is the only class to overthrow the capitalist class by banishing the capitalist mode of production, to disappear the classes for the emancipation by communism, the outcome of contradiction of the exploited capitalist class and the exploited working class. Thereby, capitalism is the foundation of communism, a classless, stateless society. Again, the Communist League and the First International both were formed to unite the workers of the world to fight against the capitalist class, to overthrow it in the year by banishing the capitalist mode of production, a global system based on commodity, capital, selling and buying, oil slavery, exploitation, etc., but rooted on private property by the communist revolution, by the working class alone, for the emancipation by communism, a scientific society of equals, free from commodity, capital, selling and buying, oil slavery, exploitation, class and class rule. Therefore, the rules of the Communist League has described as it, quote, Article 1. The aim of the League is the overthrow of the bourgeoisie, the rule of proletariat, the abolition of the old bourgeois society, which rests on the antagonism of classes, and the foundation of a new society without classes and without private property, unquote. So, the Communist League was for the abolition of the, quote, old, unquote, capitalist society for a new society without classes. That means that new society is free from classes, thus it is free from states and all other class weapons, including political party. Therefore, it is very much clear that there is no society between capitalism and communism. Rather, capitalism is the foundation of communism, a society without capitalist private property, capital, slavery, exploitation, etc. So, there is no ruler, no leader, no hero, no guide, no dictator, no preceptor, no eternal president, etc. in socialism oblique communism. Noted, nationalist property to produce commodity, to accumulate capital is also capitalist property, and thereby state capitalism is a worst form of capitalism, but useful to maximize the rate of exploitation by controlling the labor market by using state power directly, by denying the bargaining power of the oil slaves, the producer of capital, the fruit of exploitation by denying the traditional right of workers. And the general rules, October 64 of the First International has described as is, quote, considering that the emancipation of the working classes must be conquered by the working classes themselves, that the struggle for the emancipation of the working classes means not a struggle for class privilege and monopolies, but for equal rights and duties and the abolition of all class rule. That the economical subjection of the men of labor to the monopolies of the means of labor, that is, the source of life, lies at the bottom of the servitude in all its forms. So, all social misery, mental degradation, and political dependence. That the economical emancipation of the working classes is therefore the great end to which every political movement ought to be subordinate as a means. That all efforts aiming at the great end hitherto failed from the want of solidarity between the manifold division of labor in each country, and from the absence of the paternal bond of union between the working classes of different countries. That the emancipation of labor is neither a local nor a national, but a social problem, embracing all countries in which modern society exists and depending for its solution on the concurrence, political and theoretical, of the most advanced countries. That the present revival of the working classes in the most industrious countries of Europe, while it raises a new hope, gives solemn warning against a repulse into the old arrows and calls for the immediate combination of the still disconnected movements. For this reason, the International Working Men's Association has been founded, unquote. Therefore, it is very much clear from this rule that the First International was formed to unite the workers of the world for the emancipation of the exploited working class by changing the capitalist society, by the communist revolution, by the working class alone. And it is not possible in one country alone, because capitalism is a global system. Therefore, it is depending on the concurrence, practical and theoretical, of the most advanced countries, what the manifesto of the Communist Party has described as is, quote, united action of the leading civilized countries at least is one of the first conditions for the emancipation of the proletariat, unquote, phase 48, published by the ICWF. So, no democratic revolution to reduce the free capitalist orders, including serfdom, is necessary in any country under the old capitalist society, a global but an exploitative system of uneven development by nature of capitalist mode of production. But not considering again the above statements, but the Bolshevik Party was formed to develop the capitalist mode of production, to increase the volume of capital by maximizing the rate of exploitation by its founding declaration on 35 points of program. Note it, he who is working for the capitalist development to increase the volume of capital, the unfit labor, by exploiting the oil slaves, is a capitalist. So, Bolshevik Party was a capitalist party by the said program of 35 points. Bolshevik Party was formed to serve the interest of the capitalist exploiters by defeating the exploiters but the undue beneficiaries of the free capitalist orders, what was existed in that period in Russia, and it was also described in the same statement of the Bolshevik Party. But the question does not arise at all for serving the interest of the exploiters by a communist party, a party of exploited working class. So, Bolshevik Party was not a communist party. However, the Bolshevik Party has followed and carried the claimed Second International, what was formed in 1889, with a commitment to work by following the aims and objects of the First International. But the Second International has accepted the political line of the so-called right of self-determination of nations, which is totally against the communist movement and the interest of the exploited working class, but so effective to confuse the workers about their class identity and class interest, and so useful to divide the workers of the world by nation and to confine them by country. But the unity of workers of the world is the first condition for the emancipation. Therefore, a working class party to unite the workers of the world for the communist revolution, for the emancipation, is an unavoidable condition. In fact, the betrayal leaders of the Second International has tried to hide and grounded the communist movement by accepting such dangerous politics of so-called national liberation, but finally, the Second International has dissolved by the consequence of such politics of so-called right of self-determination of nations. But the Bolshevik party has followed and accepted the same politics in its 35 points program as is. Quote 9. Right of self-determination for all nations, including within bounds of the state. Unquote. Therefore, Bolshevik party was formed to hide, hinder and grounded the communist movement by following the Second International, to protect the decayed capitalism by accepting the above mentioned point 9 of 35 points. Noted, not nation but the producer of capital is working class, and the working class is the product of the exploiter capitalist class to produce commodity to accumulate capital. Thus, workers have no nation and country, but they have a world to win by losing their chain, by banishing capitalist mode of production. So, workers have no need to work for such right of self-determination of nations by ignoring and denying its own class interest. No doubt, the identity of a worker is only a worker who sells his labor power to produce commodity to accumulate capital. Maybe the language of a buyer of labor power and a seller of labor power is same, but this does not mean that the said buyer of labor power is not exploiting the said seller of labor power, as they are talking in the same language or belong to the same religion or same territory. Rather, a capitalist is a capitalist to exploit the workers, and a worker is a worker but exploited by the exploiter capitalist, and thereby the relation between both exploiter capitalists and the exploited workers is antagonistic by birth condition of capital, the debt lever. But this so-called politics of the national liberation is for the friendly relation of both exploiters and exploited of a nation or country to fight against a fraction of a capitalist class of the countries of other countries. So, such policy for friendly relation between the exploited capitalists and the exploited workers is helpful for the exploited capitalists, but so harmful and suicidal for the working class. Furthermore, the manifesto of the Communist Party has rightly described about the fate of nationality is as, quote, national differences and antagonism between peoples are daily more and more vanishing, owing the development of the bourgeoisie to freedom of commerce, to the world market, to uniformity in the mode of production and in the condition of life corresponding thereto, unquote. The supremacy of the proletariat will cause them to vanish still further, unquote. Therefore, it is very much clear from the said statement that the capitalist production system itself is banishing the concept of nationality, and finally, the whole human being will be free from the identity of nation and nationality, ethnicity, etc. by the communist revolution by the working class. But both the Second International and the Bolshevik party were against the said advanced current of the society for banishing the nationality, ethnicity, etc. originating from the commodity production system, and thereby the current is an active force and power to banish the concept of nationality, ethnicity, etc. by the existing condition of capital Number 1, reproduction, and 2, circulation. The ultimate effect of the said historical current is a single one, an undivided human being, free from discrimination and disparity, by removing and reducing all existing political concepts to divide the mankind by nation, ethnic, aboriginal, immigrant, language, religion, creed, race, sex, territory, etc., but rooted on private property. Thereby, the identity of everyone of the whole human being is only and alone a human being. Thus, the Second International and Bolshevik Party both were not only conservative but also reactionary, for they tried to roll back the wheel of history. So, Bolshevik was not a communist party. Number 2 point of the program is as, quote, 2, universal, equal and direct suffrage in election both of the legislative assembly and to all local organs of the self-government, so for all citizens and citizens who have attained the age of 20, secret ballot at election, the right of every voter to be elected to any representative body, biennial parliaments, payment of the people's representative, unquote. Just a capitalist democratic program, but no citizen of any Leninist state is enjoying such right, and undoubtedly the citizen of U.S.S.R are totally deprived from such right till its last day. So, Bolshevik party was a capitalist party by its number 2 point of the said program. Thus, it was not a communist party. Point number 5 is as, quote, 5, unrestricted freedom of conscience, speech, publication and assembly, freedom to strike and freedom of association, unquote. Certainly, these are the capitalist democratic right, but what was the real picture in the state of Lenin? Killing, even without trial, mass oppression and overpowering the white slaves and opponents by firing, arresting and confining in labor camp. It's where the worst situation of the state of Lenin. In fact, U.S.S.R was a single party system state, and other Leninist states are also the same. Lenin did not allow any kind of different view in his party. Even he expelled them from the party, those who differed with him about the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, a claimed peace treaty, but it was the cause of huge loss of Russia by paying compensation for the First World War to Germany, but it was for the interest of the German capitalists to export their commodities in the market of Russia by using the Moscow port for 24 hours in 7 days in the week as a favored nation by branding the expelled leaders as sufferer of the childish leftism. Noted, the cause of First World War was the Great Recession of 1903, and the capitalists of Germany have suffered from the huge stock. Thus, Germany has started the First World War for occupying the countries, for capturing the new market, to get relief from the huge pressure by the huge load of the huge stock. Really, a politician is a hero when he tries to capture the state power, but he is a ferocious villain when in power. Number 13 point was as, quote, 13, separation of the church from the state and of the school from the church, unquote, by the following the historical French Revolution 1789, but the said revolutionary government was against the Assembly or Union of the Workers of France to serve and protect the interest of the exploited capitalist class by oppressing the exploited white slaves. So, the number 13 point is a capitalist program. However, the manifesto of the Communist Party has described as is, quote, the communist revolution is the most radical rupture with the traditional relations. No wonder that its development involved the most radical rupture with traditional ideas, unquote, phase 50, published by the ICWF. Therefore, it is very much clear that the communism, a scientific society, is free from ideology, philosophy, religion, politics, etc., the product of the exploiter ruling classes to serve the interest of the exploiters. No doubt, communism, the replacement of capitalism, is totally free from all existing customs, tradition, culture, etc. introduced by the exploiter ruling class. So, there is no reason to be a communist party by the Bolshevik party by accepting the said number 13.A capitalist program. The summary and significance of the grand total of the 21 points of the second and third step as 16 points and 5 points of the said program of the Bolshevik party is that it was formed for the interest of the private property holders including peasants, and the party was for progressive taxation policy to expand to implement its said programs by capturing the state power by forming a democratic state, and thereby it was not against the slavery, selling and buying, commodity production, capital, tax, rent, interest, exploitation, class and class rule, etc. and etc. Noted, the cost and expenditure of a state is nothing but a part of surplus value produced by the working class. Therefore, the cost of the said democratic state, what the Bolshevik party wanted and intended to form to implement the said 35 points program, is also a part of surplus value. The grand total of profit, interest, rent, tax, etc., or the amount of the subtraction of production of cost of commodity, that is the amount of constant capital and variable capital from the price of a commodity. Thus, the Bolshevik party was formed to serve the interest of the private property holders by the cost of the exploited workers, by forming a claimed democratic state to oppress and overpowering the exploited slaves of Russia. Noted, state is nothing but the strongest oppressive weapon of the exploiter ruling class. But abolition of capitalist private property is communism, and undoubtedly communism is free from selling and buying, capital, slavery, exploitation, family, class and class weapons, including state for class rule, politics, ideology, etc. by the description of the Communist Party written by Marx and Engels. However, the manifesto of the Communist Party as described as is, quote, the lower middle class, the small manufacturers, the shopkeeper, the artisan, the peasants, all this fight against the bourgeoisie to save from extinction their existence as a fraction of the middle class. They are therefore not revolutionary but conservative. Nay, more they are reactionary, for they try to roll back the whole of the history, unquote. First part, page 30, published by the ICWF at www.icwfreedom.org. Therefore, the Bolshevik party was a reactionary party by the said description of the Communist Manifesto of the Communist Party, because it was with the above mentioned 16.5 points to serve the interest of the private property holders, including reactionary peasants. No doubt, no action of a capitalist party is considerable as communist job. Noted, any action against the slavery to end exploitation by abolishing the slavery system, the capitalist mode of production based on private property by the working class, is the communist revolutionary job. Therefore, the job of a communist party is working to unite the workers of the world to fight against the slavery system, to end exploitation of men by men, to end rule of men by men, for the freedom and liberty of all of the world, by emancipating the society by communism, the historical consequence of capitalism, the last and final class divided society, by the communist revolution, by the working class alone. So, question does not arise at all to consider the Bolshevik party as a communist party. Rather, the Bolshevik party was a so reactionary party by its founding statement. A communist party to work to unite the workers of the world for the communist revolution, for communism, thus is a global party, but the Bolshevik party was a Russian party, so Bolshevik party was not a communist party. A communist party is a class party, but the Bolshevik party was a multi-class party. So Bolshevik party was not a communist party. A communist party has no interest separate and apart from the working class, but the Bolshevik party was formed to serve the interest of the private property holders, including reactionary peasants. Thus, Bolshevik Party was a reactionary capitalist party. So, Bolshevik Party was not a communist party. 7, including Lenin, out of 43 delegates of the Congress of the RSDLP 93 had 2 votes, which is against the concept and values of capitalist democracy. But the idea is similar to the voting system of the capitalist company to elect the board of directors on the basis of amount of share of the shareholders. The said Congress has agreed the same discriminatory policy by acknowledging the supremacy of the said 7 delegates by following the political concept of the slavery society. Thus, Bolshevik Party was a capitalist party along with the political concept of the masters of the slavery society. So, not a communist party, but the Bolshevik is not fit to think and consider as a democratic party. Bolshevik Party as a political party of the exploiters had deprived and betrayed even with its supporters, workers, by founding a state of state capitalism, an absolute dictatorial state, by ignoring and denying the founding programs about democracy, sovereignty of people, right of unrestricted freedom of speech and assembly, elected parliament, etc., by conceiving the character of the double standard and the betrayal character of the exploiter capitalist class. Noted, exploiters are not only exploiter but also liar, even about exploitation. Liars are also cheater, fraud, betrayer, and many more. Lenin did so even about his state, a state of state capitalism, claiming it as socialist, and about his party, the Bolshevik Party, as Communist Party, by changing its name, what mentioned above. Even Lenin accepted the neo-economic policy by violating the constitution of Russian Soviet Federated Socialist Republic 1918 for denationalization of the state property by the decision of the said Communist Party in 1921 proposed by Lenin. So, Bolshevik Party was not a communist party but a party of capitalist interest with self-contradictory character by following the exploiter but disabled capitalist class with huge self-contradiction originated from the capitalist mode of production, a self-contradictory system by producing capital, the fruit of exploitation by exploited slaves, but owning by the exploiters capitalist. Therefore, thereby, no Leninist party or no party originated from the Bolshevik party or no party who is inheriting the Bolshevik party is a communist party. Rather, all Leninist parties are the servant of the capitalist interest. But Lenin renamed and claimed his party as a communist party, which is totally lie, false and bogus, but an intentional and ill-motivated political propaganda for creating the hard obstacle for not growing and developing the communist movement to protect the decayed capitalism currently in moribund condition with the politics of capitalist globalization along with same global organization in some global organization including IMF, the controller of the world economy but failed, found by the winners of the Second World War including Leninist big boss J.B. Stalin, a long-time supreme leader of the Bolshevik party, to serve the capitalist interests globally from a global center to protect capitalism, a society of certainty of uncertainty, but the creator of all necessary conditions for the new society, communism. So, Bolshevik party was not a communist party.